I've never been one to believe in karma. Growing up, I thought justice was a fairy tale, something people told themselves to feel better. But sometimes, life has a funny way of proving you wrong. I'm 31, the middle child in a family where being the middle child meant being invisible. My older brother, Finn, was the golden boy, strong, dependable, everything a father could want in a son. My younger sister, Sarah, was the princess, spoiled, adored, and treated like the most precious gem in the world. And me? I was just there. My father, a man of few kind words and even fewer gestures of affection, made it painfully clear where his loyalties lay. He bonded with Finn over man things and worshipped the ground Sarah walked on. Me? He tolerated my existence, and that was the best I could hope for. Mom saw it. She tried to make up for it in her own way, making sure I never felt left out when Dad forgot to invite me to father-daughter events, or when he gave Sarah the biggest slice of cake at every birthday. But she never confronted him. She never told him he was wrong. And so, I learned to live with it. The only person who ever really stood up for me was Finn. Even as a kid, he saw how Dad ignored me. When he learned to change a tire, he insisted, "I come along." When Dad taught him how to drive, Finn made sure I was in the car, too. He did his best to include me in a world that our father had locked me out of, but no matter what Finn did, I knew the truth. Dad didn't love me the way he loved them, and after years of trying, I stopped hoping he ever would. I grew up in a house where love was selective. My father had his favorites. My younger sister, Sarah, was his golden child, the princess who could do no wrong. My older brother, Finn, was the son he bonded with over man things. And me, I was the extra. When Sarah cried, Dad would scoop her up, whispering sweet reassurances. When I cried, he'd sigh and tell me to stop being dramatic. When Finn brought home an A, Dad would tell him he was going places. When I brought home an A, he barely looked up. I spent years trying to earn his attention, his approval, anything. But no matter what I did, I was invisible. Eventually, I stopped trying. Mom saw it. She tried to make up for it in her own way, always making sure. I got the same number of presents on Christmas, that I was included in family trips, but she never confronted Dad. She never told him he was wrong. Finn was the only one who ever truly stood up for me. When he was learning to change a tire, he demanded Dad let me come along. When Dad taught him how to drive, Finn made sure I sat in the back seat, watching. He forced Dad to acknowledge me in the smallest ways, but the truth was always there, unspoken, undeniable. My father didn't love me, and after years of disappointment, I stopped loving him back. When my fiancée, Kieran, proposed, I didn't rush to announce it. I wanted to enjoy the moment before letting the world and my family have their say. When I finally told them, their reactions were predictable. Mom was overjoyed. Finn was ecstatic. Arthur was happy for me. Sarah? She barely forced a smile before making some excuse to leave the call. She hated not being the center of attention, so I expected nothing less. And Dad, his response was neutral, indifferent. Just another reminder that I was nothing more than a footnote in his life. But there was one thing I had to decide. Who would walk me down the aisle? It wasn't even a question in my mind. It had to be Finn. He was the one who had always been there for me. He was the only one who ever treated me like I mattered. When I told him, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that broke my heart. "I'd love to, but I think Dad will make a big deal out of it." He didn't want to take the role away from Dad, even though we both knew Dad didn't deserve it. So reluctantly, I asked my father. His answer? No. I promised Sarah first. That's right, he had made a vow, years ago, that he would walk his baby girl down the aisle first, and now he couldn't break that promise. I won't lie. I wanted to laugh. I had expected rejection, but this was almost too perfect. I faked a sad smile, nodded, and said I understood. Inside, I was celebrating. Because now there was no guilt, no hesitation. Finn would be the one to walk me down the aisle, and Dad had no right to complain. Life has a funny way of flipping the script when you least expect it. For years, my father had worshipped Sarah. She was his golden girl, his pride and joy. He had spent decades bending over backward for her, making excuses for her selfishness, indulging her every whim. And now, she discarded him like yesterday's trash. She didn't even have the decency to tell him in person. Instead, she announced it casually over a video call, as if she were discussing the weather. "I'm asking Arthur to walk me down the aisle," she said, twirling her hair between her fingers. Dad blinked. The silence stretched. "Wait. What?" he finally croaked. Sarah sighed, clearly bored with the conversation already. "Arthur makes Mom happy. And, well, Zach and I just think it makes more sense." She didn't say it, but we all knew what she meant. Arthur has money. Dad? Not so much. The color drained from his face. His lips parted, but no words came out. His perfect princess had just blindsided him in front of the entire family, and then, like a switch had flipped, his expression changed. He snapped. "You ungrateful little brat!" he roared. "After everything I've done for you?" His voice cracked, wild with betrayal. Sarah just rolled her eyes. "Dad, don't make this a thing." "A thing? A thing?" His voice pitched higher, desperate, humiliated. His golden child was rejecting him. In front of everyone. And then it hit me. For the first time in his life, my father knew what it felt like to be overlooked, to be discarded, to not be good enough. I should have felt bad. But I didn't. I just sat there, watching karma unfold, and then my phone rang. Dad, crying, begging. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Sweetheart," he choked out, voice thick with desperation. I made a mistake. I was stupid. Please let me walk you down the aisle." I stared at the wall, listening to him sob. I should have felt something, pity, satisfaction, anything. But all I felt was emptiness. "Dad," I said slowly, "I already asked Finn." He inhaled sharply like I'd just stabbed him. You can change that." "No," I said simply. "I'll talk to Finn," he rushed. "I'll explain. He'll understand." I almost laughed. Finn? The brother? Who had spent his entire life protecting me from this exact man? No. Dad didn't want to walk me down the aisle because he loved me. He wanted to do it because Sarah didn't want him anymore. I refused to be his backup daughter. When I hung up, I immediately called Finn. He answered on the first ring. "I knew it," he muttered darkly. "He called you, didn't he?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah. Let me guess. He wants a redo?" "Yeah." Finn let out a sharp laugh. "Unbelievable." I hesitated. "Finn, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I just want to get married without any drama." "Don't worry," Finn said, his voice steel. "I'll handle it." And when Finn says he'll handle something, he means it. Finn didn't wait for Dad to call him. He called first, and he didn't hold back. "You don't get to walk in at the last second and pretend to care," Finn snapped. "You had years to be her father, and you threw it away," Dad stuttered. I know I made mistakes, but..." "Mistakes?" Finn cut him off. "Dad, you didn't just make mistakes. You ignored her for her entire life. You treated Sarah like a princess and left your other daughter to feel like she was nothing." Dad's breathing turned heavy. "I never meant, for once in your life." "Shut up and listen." Finn growled. Silence. "You spent your whole life throwing away the kids who actually loved you," Finn said, And now, the only one you ever cared about? She threw you away too. Dad made a strangled sound, like he wanted to argue, but there was nothing left to say. Sarah had used him, and now he had no one. On my wedding day, I felt a pair of eyes burning into my back. Dad. Sitting in the crowd, sulking, watching as Finn walked me down the aisle, the role he had so carelessly given up. And I didn't care. I was too busy living my life, too busy being happy. And when Finn placed my hand in Kieran's, I looked up at my brother, the man who had stepped in when my father wouldn't, and whispered, "Thank you." Finn smiled, and in that moment I knew. I didn't need my father. I never did. Sarah's wedding was last weekend. She didn't invite me. I guess she thought she was punishing me. I wasn't. From what I heard, the whole thing was a disaster. Mom and Arthur looked miserable in the photos. Dad sat in the back, sulking. Finn didn't even go. And me? I spent the weekend drinking margaritas on my honeymoon in Thailand, happier than I've ever been. Dad tried calling me again. I didn't answer, because I've finally learned something important. Some people deserve to be left behind, and my father, he's one of them. I genuinely believe it serves him right. I've had enough of him, and I don't want Sarah's or his poison to affect this new stage of my life or my new family. I'm relieved they no longer in my life. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.